Hi everybody, welcome to today's NBS webinar on the Digital Construction Report 2021. So my name is Stephen Hamil, I'm Innovation Director here at NBS, and we've got two parts to this webinar. The first part will be delivered by my colleague David Bain, who's Research Manager at NBS, looking into the findings of the Digital Construction Report. And then the second part of the webinar will be myself looking at how NBS fits into the BIM process. In terms of joining the conversation, please do that online if you're on Twitter, where we're at the NBS is our Twitter handle, and we've got the hashtag around the report, hashtag NBS Digital. We're always fascinated to look at feedback and discussion points around that. In terms of housekeeping for this webinar today, it'll last maybe 45 to 50 minutes. All attendees' microphones are muted, but please provide feedback, ask questions in the chat of the webinar as well, and any direct questions we'll answer after the webinar. So without further ado, over to you, David, NBS Digital Construction Report 2021.
Thank you, Stephen. Hello, everybody. I'm going to take you through the findings from this year's Digital Construction Survey. So a little bit of background just to begin with. So many of you may know the BIM report and the BIM survey that we've been running for over 10 years now. First started that sort of in 2010-11, where we had 400 respondents, and BIM was something that a lot of people didn't really know that much about. It was quite a new thing for many people at the time. 13% of people then had said that they had adopted BIM. We carried on tracking BIM, attitudes towards it, people's use of it over the next decade, with regular samples of around 1,000 respondents each time. And in 2020, nearly everybody was aware of BIM, and the majority said that they had adopted it and were using it. But in 2021, we decided to change things a little bit. So we recognize that BIM is clearly very important. It's still something where it's new to a lot of people. There's still a debate about its benefits and its relevance, but there are other ways of working, other issues, other technologies that are becoming increasingly important. So we wanted to recognize those and look at those as part of a broader digital transformation survey that still very much included BIM as part of that research. So we ran the survey this year with support, as we're always very lucky to have, from many organizations and institutes and professional bodies. So these are the organizations that supported us this year, and we're very grateful for the support through their networks and their members, which helps us to get representation from across the industry. So thank you to all those people who have been instrumental in that. So we collected responses over the period from April to August this year. We covered questions on digital transformation and BIM, and you'll see exactly the detail of that as we go through. We did retain some questions so we can keep monitoring changes and see how things are progressing over time. And again, we're really pleased to have just over 900 professionals responding to the survey. To kind of help encourage people to respond, for every person that did so, we donated £1 to construction charity Crash, which helps homeless people and charities that provide places for vulnerable people to stay. So this shows that people continue to be engaged with BIM and digital technology and digital transformation. We continue to have most respondents from the UK, but we also do have many people from across the world that take part in the survey. We're actually finding this is gradually increasing year on year. So this year we found that 64% of people taking part in the survey were based in the UK, so still the majority. But that's actually the lowest figure we've had from people within the UK. 36% were based somewhere else on the globe, and with 60 countries represented across 6 continents. So we've got views from a wide perspective. In terms of people's role, the survey sort of began really from a sort of consultant's perspective, in particular architects, and we can see here that they still are the biggest group taking part in the survey, with about 2/3 of the sample being made up of people from those project roles. But we do have quite a number of people in constructing sort of contractor, subcontractor roles, also suppliers, manufacturers, and people who are working as clients on projects. In terms of the particular organizations, architects are the biggest single group, but you can see here that we have multidisciplinary practices of engineers, manufacturers, contractors, as well as client organizations like local authorities and education providers. So a wide range of organizations taking part. We also continue to represent the industry on size. So we've got organizations ranging from practice with just 1 or 2 people up to those with thousands and multiple offices in different countries. And in terms of discipline, we have, again, a lot of architects take part, but it's about 1/4 of the sample. And you can see here that we have roles and disciplines from technologists, project managers, engineers, surveyors, and also people working within manufacturers and supplier organizations in marketing roles or technical roles dealing with product data. In terms of diversity, we represent the sector well in terms of age and experience. And you can see here that in reflection of the industry as it stands, the respondents are heavily weighted towards male respondents. So that's something we'd like to see changing as we keep tracking that over time. So first of all, I'd like to talk about the results that focus on BIM. So in terms of the high level figure of people saying that they've adopted BIM, we can see that it continues to be the majority that say they have done so. We're at 71% this year, which is, as you can see, looking at that trend line, very similar to the last kind of three years or so. It's stayed fairly steady around that kind of 70% or so mark, where it hasn't jumped up again like it has done in previous years. There are variations in adoption depending on people's roles. So adoption is higher among architectural practices, 81% saying that they have implemented BIM. And in smaller organizations, a trend we've seen in the past, the adoption isn't quite as high. But interestingly, most people who haven't said that they have started sort of using and adopting the BIM way of working say that they do intend doing that within the next 5 years. So it's something they plan to do. We have a very small group that say that it's something that they never intend doing, about 5%. So this kind of pattern of growth is fairly typical in new innovations and new ways of working, where there's a kind of initial fast growth among new adopters, early adopters, and then it tends to kind of slow down as it reaches more parts of the industry. So just wanted to bring out some of the things that people said in the free text in the survey. And what we tend to find is a kind of range of views, really strong buy-in, people that have embedded BIM processes into the way that they work, and they're really reaping the benefits from it, and that believe that it's benefiting the industry as a whole. So you can see some comments like that here. Others are sort of careful to point out the importance of recognizing that BIM is something which is a real positive, but not seeing it as a substitute for good design, for good building knowledge and experience. So that these things need to kind of go together. BIM isn't a replacement for those things. It should support design. Others stress the importance of clients and others embracing BIM to make it worthwhile for them to make it the norm. So the more people across the industry in different project roles that understand the principles of good information management and what they need to do in their role, then the better it's going to be for the industry as a whole, and that will kind of help to make it sort of business as usual, if you like. And there are some who feel it's not relevant to them, who do highlight that they feel it's not relevant for the kind of projects they work on, in particular those working on smaller projects and domestic projects. So a range of views in terms of the things that people are saying about BIM and kind of how it relates to them. But when we ask a bit more about what people see their BIM approach as being and ask them to describe that, then we would say it's on the BIM standards would say it's much more than about just creating 3D models. If we look at the question about this, we can see that there are some who describe their approach as being about creating 3D models, 29%. However, almost 2/3 see BIM as a process, a standardized process for managing information is set out in either the BS PAS 1192 series, the kind of BIM level 2, if you like, or the ISO 19650 series, the international standards. So it's encouraging that more people see BIM as an information management process than as simply creating 3D models using the various platforms that are out there. And in the UK, this is higher. So 41% describe their approach as following BS PAS 1192 series, and 33% the ISO 19650 series. So there are a number of tasks that should be carried out or documents produced to align with the BIM process as set out in ISO 19650. The number of respondents involved with these is almost unchanged when compared with 2020. So some of these things do appear to be kind of commonplace, that there's a majority of people that are talking about either creating them or doing them themselves or being involved with them in some way, working with others. So things like the creation of BIM execution plans, where 63% talk about being involved with those on a project, and the sharing of information via common data environments, 60%. Some tasks do remain less common, such as people having detailed responsibility matrices on projects. So there are some areas where perhaps people need to learn more about the process and be able to implement those more regularly as part of business as usual. And in terms of sharing information, there are signs here of better information management happening, with more people following a naming convention, for example. So 73% said they follow a naming convention for information that is shared. And 65% of people were clearly indicating what the shared information is suitable for. Over half are regularly highlighting the amended information through the use of revision codes. So these things have all increased on 2020. The exchange of information using construction operations building information exchange, COBE, and industry foundation classes, IFC formats, doesn't appear to be increasing particularly on the last few years, but these are used more in the UK. So 39% talked about sharing information in the COBE format, and 57% in IFC. And use of Uniclass is 39%. Again, in the UK, it's higher. So about half people are saying that they use Uniclass in projects that they've been involved with. So just to talk a bit more about classification, we asked people what kind of classification was the one that was most commonly used on their projects. So one of the things to mention, not shown on this graph here, is that quite a lot of people don't actually know what classification is. That there are some cases where people are a bit unsure about that. If we focus in on the people who do know, we can see here that Uniclass 2015 was the most used classification system, particularly in the UK, with 50% saying it's the most commonly used on the projects that they are involved with, higher than the Common Arrangement of Work sections classification. Some people do use their own in-house classification, and some people, particularly those based in other countries outside the UK, use other formats like OmniClass. So is BIM the norm? Around half say that BIM is the norm in their country. For the UK, it's just over 48%. So you know, there's still kind of different views on this. You can see from the chart here that there are, you know, a lot of people kind of agreeing that it is the case, about a third, but there's still quite a few people on the other side of the fence saying that it's not the norm in their country. And there are some comments here to kind of support those figures. Whereas, some people see the design side in particular moving forward with BIM and having adopted it. But as mentioned earlier, it's important for it to work effectively that other parts of the project team are also able to follow the same processes. So in particular, people working on site. One of the indicators of how important working in digital ways and working following the principles of BIM is whether people are using digital objects as part of their projects, and whether they are requesting those objects from suppliers of products and product information. Consistently, people have been telling us that they do need manufacturers to provide them with BIM objects. So we can see here that the percentage is actually similar for suppliers of products, with 78% providing BIM or digital objects for some of their products, and almost half providing those for the majority or all of their products. So having talked about BIM a little bit there, I'd like to talk about digital transformation more broadly and the adoption of new technologies. So just starting with a kind of big picture question, asking people if digital transformation was a journey, where their organization is on that journey. We can see here that most people feel that they have started this journey in some way. Almost 2/3, 64%, say they have been on the journey either for some time, or that they're well on the way to completing it, or that they've reached their destination. So anywhere kind of from where that little car is there to the right hand side of the image. This is a bit higher than it was last time we asked it, so it was about 54% when we asked the question previously. So it does suggest that more people are making that kind of transformational change to adopting digital technologies across the way that they work. And it's higher in the UK as well. For the same figure, it's 70%. And it's also higher among consultants, again, 70%, compared with clients, contractors, and suppliers. So it really kind of is recognition that we are in a time of transformational change. So just to look at some particular technologies and areas of working, we asked people about several of these. So starting off with cloud computing. So for some of these questions, people do mention that they're not sure whether or not it's something that they're adopting in their organizations. And that might be an indicator that the technologies aren't consistently defined, or they might just not be clear, in their organization who is doing it, which would again sort of kind of suggest it's not something which is happening widely across the organization. So we've seen over the last year or so in people's personal and working lives, there's been a huge growth in cloud computing, with people using technologies to help them communicate when it's difficult to do so in person. So we can see here that 69%, a majority of people are using cloud computing, and the vast majority expect to do so within 5 years. There's very few that don't expect to do it at all. This is higher in the UK, so 76% in the UK, and also higher among larger organizations, and it's higher than in previous surveys as well. So this is an area that where uptake in this kind of technology is growing. Things people talked about using were things like Microsoft Office 365, common data environments to collaborate and share information, and also systems like MBS Chorus to write specifications in the cloud. Another area we asked people about was the area of immersive technology. So things like virtual, augmented, or mixed reality. And we have, asked questions about this over the last few years. Excuse me. So uptake of this hasn't changed enormously. The number using it has hovered around sort of 30%. Was actually slightly above this figure in 2018 and 2020, suggesting that usage has actually dropped slightly this year. The figure is higher in larger organizations, And the most common use for this is really for client walkthroughs and presentations. So 44% of survey respondents have been part of a project that involved an element of off-site construction. And this indicates an increase on previous years. So we find that constructors were most likely to have experienced off-site construction on their projects, and also sort of the medium and larger organisations. Respondents in the UK were also more likely to have been involved in projects with elements constructed off-site, which perhaps is reflective of the UK government's drive to promote this. The pandemic may also have been a factor, with fewer people being able to work on site during lockdowns. So constructing elements of buildings off-site and then bringing them to site, and reducing the number of people that need to be there at any one time might also potentially be a factor. A wide range of elements were mentioned. So particular things like modular pods, such as bathrooms, wall or floor panels, and MEP components. And the final technology that we asked about was digital twins. So it's still quite early days for the use of digital twins, with 14% having been part of a project that used them. Use is highest amongst clients. It's slightly higher than 14% there, is 18%, perhaps unsurprisingly, as they can use the digital twins to understand how an asset is performing in use and apply that learning to ongoing maintenance or new buildings. Use was also slightly higher outside the UK. Looking at the explanations from survey respondents about how digital twins are used, it is evident that people have different interpretations of what constitutes a digital twin. We've seen this with BIM over the last few years, so this is an area where we expect to see further focus in the next few years, and perhaps a more consistent understanding of what digital twins are and how they can be used. So just to kind of look at all these together, when comparing the uptake of these different technologies and ways of working, we can see that cloud computing is used the most, followed by BIM. These figures do include those who are not sure whether their organization is using it. So if you look at figures in this way, then you can see that the vast majority have adopted cloud computing and BIM, whereas the others have got some kind of catching up to do. And looking forward to see how that might pan out, we asked people what they thought would be most important, most significant in terms of bringing benefit to the built environment in the coming years. So BIM remains at the top. If you look here, you can see those that are nearer the top and those with the more of the purple color on the right are those where people feel them going to be more significant when they ranked these technologies and these ways of working. Cloud computing is kind of seen as the next most important, but you can see that offsite construction is actually quite similar. So it does look like a lot of people see that as being quite significant in the future. And despite their limited use now, digital twins are expected to be at least as important as immersive tech going forward. So I'd just like to look a little bit at industry changes and challenges that the industry faces, and digital's role in addressing some of those things. So first of all, just looking at how we think our government's doing in each of the countries that people responded from. So looking at that as a whole, we can see that just over a third believe their country's government is leading the industry in terms of digital construction. However, only a few less actually disagree. So there's a real kind of division of opinion about whether governments are playing the role that they think they should in leading the way on digital construction. There's quite a few kind of sit in the middle and aren't sure. There is variation by geography. So those in the UK are a little more positive, with only about a quarter disagreeing. Although the subsamples are small from some countries, there are indications that people in places like Northern Europe and Far East Asia are more positive about their governments and how they're leading the way in terms of digital construction. So what about its ability to enable positive outcomes? Because this is really the purpose of actually adopting these digital ways of working, is to help create a better built environment. So there is strong agreement that the adoption of digital technologies and ways of working are helping to create better buildings and places. So 80% of people agreed with this. Having a positive impact on environmental sustainability, 75% agreed that it's doing that. And also helping to create a safer built environment. So just under 3/4 agree that that's the case also. Over a third strongly agree in all cases, and 42% strongly agree that using digital technologies is helping to create better buildings and places. So there does seem quite a lot of positive agreement there from people across the board, but there are differences, with smaller organizations being less likely to agree that digital tech will help to enable these outcomes. And respondents in the UK were also slightly less positive when compared with those of the rest of the world as a whole. But younger respondents, so the future workforce, are more likely to agree that digital technologies are having a positive effect on the built environment. So I wanted to look a little bit at the golden thread. We asked some questions about this in the survey. So most respondents do believe that they need to be working digitally to help realise the golden thread. And many agree that they also need to adopt BIM. So you can see 78% believe that they need to be working digitally to play their part, and 70% to have adopted BIM. Those in larger organisations are more likely to agree that they need to be working digitally and to use BIM. And also younger respondents are also more likely to agree with this. But interestingly, when we look at those who feel that they're clear, that they know what to do in terms of how they'll manage information to play their part in realising the golden thread, it's the more experienced respondents who actually are clearer than the younger respondents in terms of what they need to do and how they're going to manage their information. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the effect that the pandemic has had. So the coronavirus has increased the uptake of new technologies. People say that it's accelerated their adoption of digital tech. Just over 2/3 agree with this point. We asked about the future of where people expect to work going forward, with so many people in the industry having been based at home for a significant amounts of time over the last 18 months or so. We can see here that the majority expect to split their time between home and the office or factory or on site, kind of wherever they would normally tend to be based. So for the next few years, it does look very much like people will be working more flexibly, be working from different places rather than just being based in an office or in a factory or on site. So just want to make a few points as we close, really. So looking at the findings from the survey this year, we can see that professionals in the built environment do generally agree that digital ways of working are helping to achieve positive outcomes, and that BIM is a key part of that. BIM and new technologies are being adopted, but there are definitely challenges in taking the benefits to everybody in the industry, in particular small organizations, and also people who are working on site. More professionals than in the past do believe that BIM is the norm, and the standards are certainly helping. And when referring to BIM, around 2/3 now think of this as being about better information management, rather than just simply creating a 3D model or using a particular piece of software. So most people are on the journey, and though it's likely that they will continue to adopt new technologies, new ways of working, if it helps address the key challenges. And that's the key point, really, that if people can see the benefit in these ways of working, then people are likely to continue to buy into these new innovations. And I think that's especially so because younger people will see the potential of digital ways of working. So as those younger people continue to come into the workforce and then go into more senior decision-making roles, then it's likely that they'll continue to support these innovations where they can see a benefit. So thank you for listening. Please go and read the full report, which you can find online on our website at the link here. That's the mbs.com DCR 2021. And please provide your feedback. Let us know what you think. So So thank you very much. I'll hand back to Stephen now for the second part of the webinar.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. Now, second part of the webinar, myself talking about NBS and how we fit into a sort of BIM process. So we'll have a little look at three things: classification, information management, and then finally coordinating that like document set across a project. And notice David talking about 3D a little bit. We'll not have any pictures of 3D models or anything, at least in the first 2/3 of this presentation. So first of all, classification. And we heard David talk about Uniclass 2015. And just to recap there, so for those using BIM projects in the UK, we've seen Uniclass 2015, which is based on the ISO 12006 Part 2 framework, get up to about 50% now on BIM projects in the UK, even used around the world as well, which is great to see. So just a few words on Uniclass 2015. It's a classification system for managing information across the entire built environment, construction and asset management. NBS publish and maintain it, working with industry and UK government, and it's free to use. So NBS maintain it, updating it, adding new classifications every 3 months, completely free to use for industry. Structured to that standard international framework, and developed not just for buildings, but the building sector and like all infrastructure, like the whole built environment, bridges, tunnels, roads, rail, water, waste, and for the whole life cycle. So not just for briefing and design, but also for construction, procurement, asset management. So in terms of the tables that are in Uniclass, the tables that have been published cover sort of all scale of items. For example, an entire complex, that could be sort of an airport, university complex, all the way down to the smallest of things like nuts and bolts and pipes, which would be found in the products table. And we have two tables that are under development that we're asked for feedback on process activities and properties and characteristics. I'll pop the website up in a second where you can find more information. And in terms of engaging with government and industry over the years, just a small set of some of the sort of larger companies, departments, groups that we've worked with on the screen there. If you'd like to have a full webinar with case study examples, nbs.com/events have a couple of nice, really long webinars with sort of real life examples. The screenshots here show some examples from Department for Education looking at their schools program and how Uniclass works with the sort of information management and IFC data transfers, things like the spaces and locations, activities, products that go into schools. And another really nice webinar available on demand has some good examples from the Environment Agency. So looking how you see the codes on the right hand side, defining their assets across the UK, whether things are generators or controls, hydraulic assemblies, etc. And against each of these assets, looking at the particular property sets that are important to them, their information requirements and the actual data fields and ranges, and how they're trying to model their entire assets across the UK. So two good case studies there. In terms of working or continuing to work with industry and government, we're now part of the government industry and interoperability group, which got a really nice mention in the TIP 2030 publication from government. So two of my colleagues have seconded part of the week, Sarah Delaney and Chris Vickers, working with a government and industry to continue to improve Uniclass. So a few PowerPoint slides there, just sort of setting the scene. But in terms of where you can download Uniclass from, if you go to our website and come across to the right-hand side, everything about Uniclass is on this page here. So introduction, articles, if you want to download the tables, have a look at the change log, revisions, all the tables there on the left-hand side. And also we have a little widget further down where you can go across all the classifications in the tables and to just get those little codes. How do we use Uniclass at NBS? We now use it in both of our main software platforms, so both NBS Chorus and NBS Source. So if we have a little look at NBS Source here, it is the primary classification system for all of our product information that we publish with our partner manufacturers. So for example, if I start to search for air curtains, these categories here are exactly the same categories that are in the product and system tables from Uniclass 2015. So if I then sort of ask to show products that are air curtains, you can see that we can group products from different manufacturers together. If I go up a level, so from the 4th level of the classification to the 3rd level, I'm in the products table here for heat emitters, and there's all of the sort of similar categories, like different types of heat emitters, from radiant tube heaters, radiators, trench convectors, etc. And as I click here, for example, I can see various radiator products. And we're using that sort of plain language. It's a radiator, which is a heat emitter, but as you hover over the top, you can see the Uniclass codes doing the hard work sort of behind the scenes. And as I scroll down the page here, you can see the primary classification there. And we'll also position it against our common arrangement of work section content as well. And that allows us to then go into the sort of technical characteristics. At a sort of system level, where you think there's a number of products come together to produce a whole system, I'll just show an example for maybe a partition system. So we've got partitioning systems, framed partition systems. And if I click here, again, you see the Uniclass category. This time it's a system. Again, plain language first, and then the number second. And I can jump down a level there and see various Egyptian board partition systems from the likes of CNEX, Knauf, James Hardy, etc. And that's the sort of level above a product. So you can imagine a system that's made up of a number of products. And if I just jump down the page here, you see the primary classification system, and then where it's positioned in the core's content. And when you start going down to the technical information this time, you can see the different products that can come together: lining products, framing products, sealing products, to produce that final system. And all of the information that you see here in NBS Source is also positioned against our generic content in NBS Chorus. So this is our specification platform, NBS Chorus, where again, you're modeling information. There's not big pictures of 3D models here, but it's about information and management. So if I jump across into this project, you can structure all of the prelims. So from the start of the project all the way through to asset management at the end. That's done with the PM codes, the project management tables. And if I come to the technical spec here, you can see, again, plain language first, and then the codes here to group similar items together. So 2 handrail systems in this spec. If I want to come and add new content, like say low temperature hot water heating system here, as I add that to the job, let's add another one as well. I'll add the partition example, so we can just let's put that gypsum board partition system, exactly the same classification code. It allows the specifier to specify everything from a description of the system to the performance of the system, down to the products and the workmanship surrounding the installation. So if I look at low temperature hot water heating systems, our technical authors have researched the products and the type of products that come together to form that system. For example, the heat source, the pumps, the pipes, any fire stopping valves, the insulation around the pipes. And against every single one of these, you have the potential values. In the background, the Uniclass 2015 codes, but the clauses in NBS using the Uniclass 2015 content are sort of objects. They're non-geometrical objects in their own right. And like I say, that this heating system is made up of a combination of air curtains and radiators in terms of the function of heat emission. So as you make those choices and click save, you're modeling the relationship on that particular project between the system and the products that it contains. And then you can specify that product in generic terms in terms of the standard that's required and the technical characteristics. Or when I click manufacturer, because we've linked the information together from that standard classification, I can see all of those radiator products on the right-hand side, should I wish to specify by brand. And if I jump across to the gypsum board partition system here, and just open that on the screen, I think the first thing to say is you may have more than one partition system type on a job. So you can create your own, I'll call it internal wall system 001. You can have more than one on a job and put your own little type codes in. But if we look on this gypsum board partition system, as I go to the manufacturer tag, we've managed to position and link everything together. It's all about efficiencies and accuracy by linking information together for our customers. In terms of analyzing that, you can come to a project that's got lots of content in, for example, here. And you can filter by the codes on the right-hand side here to see sort of similar things together. So for example, here, there's the different wall lining systems, which are SS2525. Okay, the next part of the presentation, we look at information management. And in terms of information management, looking at the 19650 series of standards, just again, reflecting back on David's presentation, really doing that sort of deep dive inside of what is a BIM project. When you're sharing information, are you using a naming convention? Are you clearly saying what it's suitable for? Is there that audit trail with sort of revision information, etc.? And you can see that that's starting to get used in the UK more and more. So jumping across to NBS again and saying how we fit, obviously when sharing information like drawings and schedules from the 3D modeling environment, you follow the 19650 process. It's also possible to do that when you're publishing your specification information. So jumping back to that same project here, it's possible to keep a record of all of the specifications published from Chorus, which are probably then put in the common data environment. So if we have a little look here, you can see that earlier today, my colleague Kate published, as an architect, the specification on this particular project from this company, the handrail package, and it's clearly got what its status code is and what its revision is. If I come now and change one of those handrails, so let's come to handrail 2 here, and what I'm going to do is just change the spec of the stainless steel anchor socket. So I'm changing it from an A4 rating to an A2 rating. And what I'm also going to do is add a new clause as well. So I'm going to come in and add a new clause to the bottom here about removing the samples at the end of the project. So I've modified the specification, and I want to show those revisions clearly in terms of when it's published. So I'm going to come back here now to the top level, and I'm going to publish the handrail package again. There's a number of steps in the wizard here, which I'm going to go through reasonably quickly, but I'd like to compare that with the previous handrail package. So it's nice and clear, say, for the cost consultant or the contractor to see what has changed. And I want to save this as a record of what's being published outside from the spec. And it remembers the metadata from the previous publication. So it's very easy to just sort of increment the values that do need incremented, or leave things the same for if it's the same sort of status, etc. And then I'm just go and publish that. I'll give the file name the same as the publication number, because that'll be the sort of PDF that gets generated. Standard default style sheets. You can make it look exactly as you want in terms of your font and your logo and document control sheets, etc. But just showing the default style sheet here. As I open, now you can see that handrail 1 remains unchanged on the table of contents, whereas handrail 2 has clearly been revised. And as I jump here, you can see that the stainless steel anchor sockets have been revised, and it's now to the steel grade of A2. And as we go down, the specification, the new clause on removal of samples has been added. So you're getting that nice sort of publication history building up through the project of what you've issued, and you've got a record of what's been issued as the sort of PDF that you can come and download at any time. And inside those PDFs, the revision history. So the third part of how MBS is integrated into the BIM process here is around coordinated project information. So I said I wouldn't show any 3D models for the first 2/3, but here's a few 3D models on the screen here. We've got plugins for all of the sort of leading design software, so Revit, ArchiCAD, Vectorworks, and it's the same plugin in terms of functionality for all of the packages, whether you're on a PC or a Mac. And that's allowing you to link the model with the specification, and then inside the model, link those objects with the specification clauses, and just coordinate the classifications on your annotations, and just to make sure that design matches the specification. So everything's coordinated and nice and clear for the project team that receives that documentation. So let's do a live demonstration of that. So what you can see on the screen here is the Autodesk Revit package, and we have a sort of a 3D digital model on the left-hand side. And this model here is linked to a specification in Chorus. And you can see this is the Chorus panel inside of Revit, exactly the same projects we've just been looking at. I'm going to come and find the linked specification, which is this one. You see the little icon there, which says I've previously linked the two together. And then inside here are the various systems and products which are linked to the equivalent object here. So if I click on the flat roof of the building, I can come now and see if I've got permissions, I can actually work on the specification as I'm doing the design. Similar thing here for this curved roof, a stainless steel roof covering system. So you've got that nice sort of one-to-one link between the system, like with say a layered object here, the materials and the products, or if you've got any sort of families to the products or system, whichever is relevant. That makes annotation this is a much better process. So I'll come through here, and as you click on the external cladding system here, you can see that the system itself is linked, as are the various products inside there. And these codes that you see in the spec are the same ones that are used, if I just pull that on screen, inside the objects themselves. So really lightweight linkage, so you can write your specification externally in the Chorus cloud environment, but have all of these synchronized annotations that you can use in your shared tools, using your callouts inside the model here. And we have this nice little button here, like model report. And what this does is report on everything that hasn't been linked to the spec yet, everything that has, and then any issues that might come up. So we just demonstrate that if I want to say, what have I not linked to the spec, or maybe what have I not added to the spec yet? And I can come through here and just say, like, show me the furniture. And as I click through here, the NBS reports is sort of driving the model here. So I can have a look at all of the items I haven't yet specified and decide whether I want to add those to the spec, or maybe leave them because it's just maybe somebody else's design responsibility. Where things have been linked together, and like what we saw in the annotations, you can very quickly sort of jump to that specification. So for example, the woodblock flooring here, when I click to look at that, it highlights it there in the model, but also jumps to it in the specification, so you can very quickly see it and, if necessarily, modify it or make notes against it, etc. And the last thing to note here is the issues report. So it's telling me everything's linked really nicely, but if I was going to go and break something, let's just have a look. So this ceiling system is currently CLG 051 board suspended ceiling system. Let's just go and find that. And I'm going to deliberately sort of make this uncoordinated. So I'm just going to call it whatever, washroom ceiling don't spell it correctly, and I'll call it 101. So we've got a problem now because the printed PDF is going to be talking about a washroom ceiling 101, whereas in the drawing, maybe the quantity takeoff is going to be talking about CLG 51 board suspended. But if we go here and just look at that model report one last time, where we come across to the issues is giving a warning and saying that the ceiling systems now, it doesn't match. And we've got a little button here, there's lots of them, you can just click fix all. And if you look on the left-hand side there, it brings it back in the sync and tells you there's no problems. So quick sort of three-part presentation there, just looking at how NBS can help you with your BIM process. The BIM process is just much more than just sort of the 3D modeling side. So just a summary in terms of what we've seen today. We've had a presentation of my colleague David looking at the digital construction report. If you'd like to see that in a lot more detail, the website there, the mbs.com/DCR2021. So please take your time and have a look through some of the findings there. In terms of further information about NBS, Uniclass 2015, I just put it into Google and you're going to jump onto this address, but it's the mbs.com/Uniclass. And similarly with Chorus and Source, it's the mbs.com. Go to our homepage and sort of jump across to find out more about our two main platforms. NBS Source, if you want to research and look at manufacturer product technical information, or if you're a manufacturer yourself and you want to push that information into our system. In NBS Chorus, if you want a sort of a cloud specification platform where you can write specifications in either Uniclass 2015 or code format. Please, I hope you've put lots of questions in the chat today. I'll be looking forward to looking at them afterwards. But you can also give us a ring at any time on the number below and drop any emails to info@thembs.com. So thank you very much. Take care, everybody, and great that you could join us today. Bye-bye.